Hello, I'm Jackie Lucky, your financial planning maestro. This series of podcasts is aimed at financial planning professionals and also those who are looking to enter the financial planning profession. We will be talking during the podcast about all things certified financial planner certification related, talking to other CFPs around the world, and also we will be dropping in on some new entrants who've just entered the financial planning profession, and we'll be checking up along the way on a regular basis with them to see how they're getting on. I hope you enjoy today's podcast. Hello and welcome. I'm Jackie Lucky, your financial planning maestro. And today we are talking about a very serious subject and something that is very important for all financial advisors, paraplanners, admin staff and financial planners to understand and know about. And who's the person who's joined me in this very interesting conversation that we're about to have is Michelle Hoskin from Standards International. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Now, we have normally you're a very bubbly person, I know, and we've had lots of fun together in the past, but today is a very serious conversation because we are talking all things about financial abuse, how to spot it, what to do about it, what the stats are, and trying to give us many helpful pointers for our not only paraplanners, but actually admin staff or anybody who works in the financial services world, is going to be coming into contact with clients. So we're just going to run through lots of different questions, and I'm going to play devil's advocate and throw lots of questions at you today.
Perfect. Love it.
So let's start at the very beginning. Now, everybody knows you, Michelle, but tell us about how you became interested in this specific area of raising awareness of financial abuse and how you came to develop the training for it to enable advisors to spot it.
Absolutely. So obviously I've been, it seems like a lifetime, but I've been kicking around financial services now for nearly 25 years. I mean, I came in when I was only 20. And I suppose my view has always been that financial advisors, planners, and kind of any person within a financial services business has such potential, not only for themselves, but when things are done well and things are done right, they just seem to be able to unlock so much more value in their client relationships. And for a sector that's, told, clients are king, clients are the most important people, clients put clients at the center of the universe, and all our regulations really along that line. I just kind of felt like, there was so much more that organizations, firms, practices can do to really not only be amazing to their clients and continue to be so, but actually be amazing for their team and themselves ultimately. So that's always been my mantra, I suppose. And over that time, financial services, and I put on my posts regularly, like hashtag it's personal, because this is not what I do. This is who I am. Like this is who I am. And that's why, I know lots of people and lots of people know me because I keep popping up all over the place because this is who I am. And when I first found out about financial abuse, it was almost by accident, as all these things are. And I, through MDRT, Million Dollar Round Table, I met I've become very good friends with a lady called Amanda Kassar. And she asked me, I'd not really known her for very long, and she was a financial planner on the Gold Coast in Australia. And she'd asked me, would I be happy to be interviewed for her book? And I said, absolutely. I said yes. And then I was like, what book? Like, that was always me. Yes first, and then ask questions later. And she said, I'm writing a book about financial secrets in terms of, what's your relationship with money and, a businesswoman and blah, blah, blah. And I said, absolutely, of course I will. So she interviewed me and that was absolutely fine. And then when she sent me through a copy of the book to sort of check that I was happy with it, and I got a chance to read everybody else's story. And in the story, there was a lady called Tanya Target. And when I read this book, at the time, she was writing about her 8-year-old daughter. And at the time, my little Ruby was 8 years old. And this woman's journey, and I am clearly paraphrasing in what I'm telling you, but she'd gone from being this international jet-setting businesswoman, super successful in her own field, super wealthy, own home, money in the bank, blah, 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 to literally getting to the point that due to an economic and financially abusive relationship with a narcissist, as it turned out, she ended up being in a position where she was basically siphoning off shopping money, of her own money, interestingly, to buy food cards that she was hiding at her friend's home, so that when she did decide to pluck up the courage to leave her husband, she could feed herself and her daughter. And I remember reading this story thinking, good heavens, like what on earth is that? But that wasn't the only story that was in this book like this. And I said to Amanda, I phoned her up and I was like, I've just read Tanya's story. Is this real? And she's like, is what real? I said, this whole abuse around money. She's like, yeah, it's common. It's commonplace in Australia. It's a pandemic in Australia, New Zealand. I was like, well, I've never heard any financial advisors talk about it. I don't even know if they would know if it was literally sitting in front of them in their meeting room. I don't think they've got any idea. And I did a little straw poll on Twitter and social media, as you do. And it was basically unanimous. I have no idea what you're talking about, Michelle. Being me, little firecracker, crack on, running a standards business, an international standards body. I was just like, well, that's all I need. I didn't know business. I didn't need a business case or a feasibility study to crack on. I just cracked on, and we pulled the team together. And Amanda and I, with input from other interested and international parties, created a training program for financial planners, advisors, power planners, administrators, and other professionals, I should say, lawyers, accountants, in the area of financial abuse. And as a result of that training, when individuals then go through that process and they demonstrate, because it's all evidence-based demonstration, that they have the knowledge and they know what to do with it, then we award them with the financial abuse certificate, which is renewed year one, the year after, and then every 2 years thereafter. And we've just been amazed by the response, both from individuals, from organisations, from firms, because one of the things that I come across, Jackie, which is sort of it's kind of coming full circle as you go down these journeys and you uncover and you learn as you go. Two things: when you know better, you clearly do better. And the second point is, it's about to go out on a social media post actually in the next few days, and it's even though a financial planner might be listening to this, or a financial advisor who's a divorce coach and can do this and be able to spot it, it's irrelevant, because it's not about whether that planner or that advisor could spot it, or that they know they have the skills. It's about the victims knowing that you've got the skills, so that they come to you. And that's really what the mark is, the certification mark. It's just a beacon to say, I'm going to seek out somebody in this area that can help me. And this is the mark I'm looking for. It's like chartered status, or I'm looking for a CFP who can do financial planning. It's no different. Yeah. But we needed a mark, because otherwise, what on earth were people looking for? How would they find anybody? And as a result, we're building a directory and we're talking to charities and all sorts. So it's become a bit of a passion project, if I'm honest. It's not about the money. Like, we've got other business services. It's just because, I'm a strong alpha female, and we'll talk about stats in a minute. But women sadly are the greatest victims of this. Yeah. And I'm just not having it. I mean, no. I've got the power to do something about it, and I am. Yes. And that's where it starts and ends, really.
Absolutely. And so let's talk about the stats then, because I know you mentioned there that it does seem to be predominantly women, but not exclusively women, who are suffering financial abuse and have suffered, for many decades. Give us some of the stats out there about, what's the level of suffering that's going on with the population.
With pleasure. And I'm going to talk around it a little bit to sort of give some context to some of this stuff, because I think it's important. So just for clarity, there's two main definitions. There's economic abuse and harm. So you can interchange abuse and harm depending on how you feel it resonates with you. Some people feel uncomfortable saying abuse, so they'll say harm. So economic harm, financial harm. Okay, either one is perfectly fine. So economic harm. So if you take me and you, or you take, Robert, you take Stuart, you take anybody. And, in order for us to thrive as humans, we need a certain economic resources, money, security, a home, a shelter, food, access to technology, access to our friends, our family, our mobile phones, a job. These are all things that, from an economic perspective, make us well. They add to our personal economic well-being. And economic abuse is when one party either restricts, sabotages, or exploits another person's economic resources. So I've got a house, I pay all the bills, and a boyfriend moves in and I can't get him out. And he pounces off me and he doesn't pay any bills and I'm paying everything. And so that's a combination of exploiting and effectively, both my economic resources, my home, and my financial resources in my money. So there's economic harm and abuse. Financial harm and abuse is when it's specifically related to money. It's like the equivalent of, the bandwagon of financial well-being. It's like well-being and financial well-being. The well-being of me is lots of things, but my financial well-being is one of my things, right? So that's in comparison, as a comparison. So the stats are basically that this is from research from 2001, and there's research being pumped out all the time, but these are some of my favorite figures because I know through other research that these figures are going up. Okay. So they estimate that it's about 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men that in their lifetime will experience some form of economic abuse. And what's even more scary about that is in that 95% of cases of economic abuse, there is other forms of domestic abuse in play, whether it be sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, psychological abuse, in 95% of cases. So one of my biggest drivers was, because I hate the thought of any form of abuse because I'm a strong female, right? And that it just makes me feel ill. So when I knew that the figures were so high, I thought, gosh, if all these financial planners spotted financial abuse in these families, they're also probably going to uncover domestic abuse as well. Double tick for me, right? Because they wouldn't necessarily, as a natural, start having conversations about, are you in a domestic abusive relationship? But it's quite common for somebody in financial services to have a conversation with somebody about money, right? That's what we do every day. That's what you guys do every day. Right? So it's not out of place. So they can get away with it without it causing any kind of concern by the other party. So, 1 in 4 women, 1 in 7 men, 95% also experience other forms of abuse. But there's also some figures that also shock me is in a survey that was done with about 2,500 people in it, all of victims of economic or financial abuse, 32% of the women said that they would leave or they're planning on leaving, and only 16% of the men said they would. So what that tells us is that men don't leave. Men stay. So women are more likely to remove themselves from an abusive relationship. Men are not. So I don't believe it's 1 in 7, not any day of the week. I think it's more men are a victim of these forms of abuse than they would ever let on that they are. Okay.
Because they're just being silent and putting up with it.
It's ego, it's embarrassment, it's pride, it's, well, I'm the main provider. How can I leave? The children are there. She can't do anything without me, whatever the reasons, right? And then another figure that really shocked me, and I actually found this stat out before I delivered a webinar to the Association of Professional Compliance Consultants, most of which were men on this webinar, and I could see all their faces, right? And I brought up this particular slide and I said, in one of the main forms of abuse or economic abuse when men are the victims is a restriction of food. So a female abuser will limit the amount of food that a male victim can have in order to coercively control them, right? And then there's forms of, a sleep allowance. You're only allowed to sleep for 6 hours a night. There was a story that I was chatting to a lady whose mum had died, and her abusive partner, not physically abusive, He was coercively controlling her. He gave her 1 month to grieve over the loss of her mum. That's all she had. His control. Okay. So this is, we need to grieve. It's our economic to be economically well ourselves. So some of these figures are horrific. Interestingly though, those who are currently experiencing economic abuse, 1 in 3, so 35%, said that it started during COVID. It wasn't there before. It came about because of COVID, whether that be because of loss of jobs, homeschooling the children, whatever, general panic, general apprehension, but it's got out of hand. And 35% say it started during COVID. And there was an amazing campaign that was ran early doors in lockdown, and it's a massive billboards all over. I saw them all over the place, and it said abusers always work from home, right? And really nobody ever thought about that. Like nobody ever thought, well, all these potential people who are vulnerable are going to be shipped home, and then the country goes in lockdown again, and off they go again. You've then got, things like, 10% of those who have experienced abuse, nearly 1 million people say that the abuse is ongoing. And you speak to people and, they've had their car keys confiscated because they've not obeyed their husband, the food example, debts run up in their name, there's tons of stats, right? And 26% of respondents say that it's negatively impacted their credit rating, and it's just continual, and it's getting worse. And one bigger stat is 16% of UK adults, which is 8.7 million people, say they have experienced economic abuse. Now that is vast, absolutely vast. So it's only getting bigger and busier. And if you may have seen more recently, HSBC have run these huge campaigns.
Yeah,
you've seen them, right?
Yeah, on the telly. Yeah,
and great for them. I mean, it was on BBC TV this morning. I'm going on GB News on the 1st of July to talk about it. It's on the increase, and financial planners and advisors cannot just turn their head and just go, this is not our job. It's everybody's job. It's mine. Absolutely. As my friend's friend, yours as a family member to people. And if those stats are right, I've got more than 4 friends. So I can tell you that, one of my 4 friends is currently, likely, based on the stats, suffering at the hands of some sort of economic abuse.
Yeah.
Heartbreaking.
So let's talk about, you mentioned there that, advisors and planners, paraplanners, anybody who basically is involved in, contact with clients and potential clients, what can they do? What are the warning signs that if you could just say, just listen to this, and if you hear these kinds of things coming out, or you see this sort of situation, first of all, what are those things that we should be looking out for before we move on to what I can do about it? What are those warning signs that we need to look out for?
So I think one of the triggers, so think about life events. So we'll talk generically for a moment. So, if you've got a young couple that are getting married, having a baby, moving in together, one's inherited money, one's got a higher paid job than the other, one's been made redundant, anything where there's a life change, there is vulnerability in one party or another. Okay. So I think that's almost a trigger of a moment. Okay. Where, an elderly parent's gone into care. There's been powers of attorney put in place. There's more than one sibling. There's a disagreement about what's going to happen to mum. Anything where there's some sort of disruption or change, I think is a key point. I think then you go down a little bit deeper and then look at things like behaviors. Now, narcissism, we could do a whole podcast on narcissism, right? But narcissists are like sheeps in wolves' clothing. So, but one thing that I know financial planners and advisors are very good at when they actually are paying attention or listening is they're a very good judge of character. They're very intuitive and they love people, which is why they do this job in the first place, and they want to help. Now, this is going to sound awful because I think, and I hope it's listened and heard in the right way. When we get out of our own way and make it less about how smart we are and what we know and all about us in a meeting and actually observed a bit more, we will notice more. So I think physical behavior, dropped head, withdrawn. I think where you've got someone overpowering another person, belittling, almost dismissing their input, that they don't know what they're talking about, coercion, like, don't we, Sam? Don't we think that? Or husbands not bringing wives not bringing husbands to the meeting, children always being around. I'll tell this story very quickly because it just shows the extent, right? So I was actually at the office of a client, financial planner, about 4 months ago. And I was listening. I actually overheard a conversation he was having with his team member. Obviously, I'm under NDA and it's all okay to do so. And they were talking about a case of where they believe that the parent, the mother, was being financially or potentially financially abused by her children, three children. And I was listening in a little bit and I kept quiet. And obviously, these guys are going through our training. So first of all, they'd spotted it, that it could even be a thing. I would probably like to guess that before the training, they wouldn't have even picked up on it, right? And I was listening in and I said, can I just ask a few questions? I said, just explain to me what's going on. And basically, the son had put pressure on the advisor and the mum because he wanted more money. And I said to the advisor, is it just the son that's wanting more money? And he's like, no, it's actually the two other sisters. They also are asking for money out of mum's investments. And I said, tell me about the relationship between the brother and the two sisters. The two sisters are pretty wealthy. The son isn't. Straight away, trigger for me, right? And I said, so he's effectively, and this is obviously in hindsight, I can now report in, he was coercively controlling his sisters so that collaboratively they were all going for mum's money, so that he didn't stand out. But what I spotted, and only through choice of words, and I was very observant because I know what I'm looking for, it was his wife that was coercively controlling him to control his sisters, to financially exploit their mum. Now, I can tell you that I bet that's common because I spotted it within about 20 minutes of the conversation. And the advisor's like, no, surely not. I said, I will bet Ruby's life that that's what's happening. So they called a family meeting. They used the words vulnerability, economic harm in the email. And it was basically they chaired a family meeting and he literally got to the bottom of it. And the son, the brother, basically contacted him after, total breakdown, because he'd been busted. I'd busted him and I had busted him from afar. So if with the skills and the knowledge, you can spot this stuff because you're just on high alert. And why would we not be on high alert for financial abuse in financial services? It's got to be our top one, we're talking about consumer duty and all the rest of it. You've got to be looking at both financial well-being and financial harm.
Yes.
It's basics, but we're just not there yet, which is why we did the training and why we do the certification.
And I think what's really interesting about that story is it's not just about sitting in front of the client and, kind of looking for the visual clues. It's not just about that. This can be a significantly sized web of people involved in the financial and economic abuse. And it can be parties. And I think that's one of the interesting things. A lot of financial planners now talk to their clients about a family tree of people that are important to them and things like that. And things like that can actually help bring out those individuals to highlight them to you, particularly if they're not directly related to the clients that you might have in front of you.
Well, I've one of the practice managers in my firm. Obviously, she got wind of what we were doing, and she said, she messaged me one day and she said, "Can I have a private word?" And I actually thought she was going to tell me she was resigning and that she wanted me to find her another job. Was my initial thought. And she told me about her neighbour, who she believed was being economically abused, financially abused by another neighbour, young woman, got children, single parent. She was doing the ladies' shopping. And the older lady had confided in this practice manager and said, I don't remember drawing out £500, but it's on my statement, right? Well, shackles are up straight away. We're like, hang on a minute, let's figure out what's going on here. And we uncovered that it was a case of financial abuse. And that's to a neighbour. And the only reason that, because what this practice manager would have probably have done is, he needs to get in things and, but because she knows that this is a thing, she asked me about it. So I told her what to do, and I gave her some guidance on what to do and what to say and how to approach it and all the rest of it. But this is not, she's a practice manager talking about her neighbour who's 86 years old. We're not even talking about, I'm an advisor in front of a client. Like you say, it's common. And we haven't even touched on elder abuse and granny and stuff like that. I mean, that's a whole other thing, but it's all a form of economic and financial abuse.
Mm. Well, and I think that, talking of the older population, then I think, as that older population is growing, isn't it? And, becoming more vulnerable. I know certainly from my parents' perspective, they're both 80 now. And they still would like to be, are in charge of their own finances, but, would like to be in charge of their own finances for many years to come. But, with
also, Jackie, I had a chat with a lady yesterday in Australia who's running a lot of initiatives and well-being and mental health over in Australia. And she said, the thing is, the parents are 90 and their kids are 70. Mm. And their children aren't getting the money they thought they were going to get in inheritance.
Yeah.
So they banked on it, thinking mum and dad are never going to live till they're 90. And mum and dad are still kicking around at 90.
Yes, still spending it.
You're spending it. So almost like that generation that's now 70, 60, 70, it's not quite gone to plan for them. Because their parents never lasted till 90, not in a second. So it's interesting. It's all changing. The world has changed, and vulnerability. And I've been asked to comment on, the consumer duty, and, it's all about service and fees. I'm like, it's got nothing. God, that's one tiny element of client's vulnerability. Am I charging the right thing? I'm like, really? Do me a favor. Come on. Like,
what's probably going to be interesting is that money, if you've got, clients, in their 90s with children in their 60s and 70s, then it's going to skip a generation, that money. So when the dollop of money skips that generation down to those in their 30s and 40s, then that opens the gate for many younger people to be financially and economically abused.
Absolutely, and it's basically the term we say a lot is they, as in the perpetrator, they want what you have. It's very simple. And I think, this is, I don't often talk about this bit that I'm about to say, but I think, domestic abuse has become so mainstream. It's there's now campaigns with, about, young lads, not, speaking out or not speaking out when a girl's being harassed in the street. So we now know mainstream, you talk to Ruby and even, my generation, my parents' generation, we know that domestic abuse is bad. Okay. So it's now unacceptable for a perpetrator to physically abuse somebody. You're a baddie if you do that. And with the gender roles becoming so blurred, with women earning lots more than they did 20, 30 years ago, and holding down the family and running businesses, it's sadly, I think, it's actually thrown open and put into question the dominant male role in the household. So what's happening is often they're not earning as much as the woman in, not often, but, in some households. And I think they're becoming dominant in the finances because it's the only thing that they've got. And they'll take control of the finances because she's busy or whatever. And literally in the last 2 weeks, I've spoken to 3 financial planners, all of whom have been financially abused. One's a fellow, one's chartered, and one's diploma qualified. All a victim of financial abuse, and they've come forward and spoke to me.
Wow. And that's very brave of them to be able to do that, to be able to approach you and actually say it, isn't it?
It is. And actually, it's part of their healing. It's part of their, I need to tell somebody my story.
Yeah.
One of them, the lady who's a fellow, she was saying to me that she's currently going through a divorce and divorcing her husband. And the judge has basically said to her, you should know better. And then she's on the phone to me going, yes, I should. But I fell for it. I had a business. They're like, how can you be financially abused? You had a business, you had property. Yeah, none of it was in my name. He was taking all the rent from it. The business, I had to put all the money into a joint bank account, which he had full control over, really. So on the face of it, she was a successful financial planner, but a victim of financial abuse. So, and she's never spoken out. So she's not one of the 1 in 4.
No. That's amazing, isn't it?
It is. And, it's happening in our client banks, but also, Jackie, it's happening within our teams. And there's a whole other list of triggers and signs that you've got team members being economically or financially abused in your workforce.
Yes.
And we've got to look out for them. And when the sector's just not, because it's so fixed on the client, it's missing the people inside their families.
Yeah. I can remember working with a member of staff many, many years ago now, and her phone was always warbling, and it was her boyfriend. Have you arrived at work? Are you at your desk? Have you had your break? What did you have for, did you have a coffee at break time? Where are you going at lunchtime? Should I meet you? What, are you back at work after lunch? And, are you at the bus stop going home? All of those sorts of things. And it starts to build up. And I think if it builds up slowly, I guess if you're busy, you don't really notice. And you think, oh, it's because they care, isn't it? And then actually it turns into something more.
This is where love bombing comes in. So love bombing is, I love you. I just care about you. I want to protect you. I want to wrap you up in and women love nothing more than a bit of love bombing, right? Let's be honest.
Yeah.
We are suckers for it. We are. And the problem is a lot of narcissists use love bombing as a form of initial control. And just very clear as well, the difference between sort of abuse and harm versus care is the purpose behind it. So if someone's using any form of abuse or control to control you, then that's bad. If it's for care, then it's a different conversation. So if the reason behind it, if the intention is of care, that might just be it's got out of hand a little bit. They're just a bit over caring. Right. So even I'm flying to Boston and Stuart's like, well, who are you flying with? What airline are you flying with? How are you getting to the airport? Well, he's not controlling me. It's because I haven't left the country on my own since beginning of COVID when I wasn't with him anyway. So it's all new to him, me traveling alone with my suitcase. To me, it's not, right? But to him, it is. So, but if it got recurring and it was escalating, then we know there's a problem. So it's the escalation of it which makes it coercively controlling as opposed to coercively caring. It's just it's just a different play on it, really, and you've got to spot it.
Yeah. And so let's assume that we know some financial planners who have some clients and they have spotted that something doesn't look right. Maybe you've got one client who's controlling the whole conversation, who's chivvying the other person along, and that other person is looking at the floor and saying yes or remaining silent 90% of the time. So something's up. What can practically, because I think remember when George Kinder first came to the UK, I had this conversation with him the other day, actually, on one of our other episodes, and we talked about, well, this is all well and good for him saying, well, you must do this or you must ask all these extra questions and, all the rest of it. But then it's what do you do with the information once you've picked it up? How? Because we are not counsellors. We are not professionals to be able to deal with this. So, there are probably a number of listeners out there who are thinking, yikes, well, a bit like repeating that conversation with George. That's all well and good picking it up and great that we can pick it up, but actually it's only useful if we do something with it. So what can we do with that information?
So let's assume then, that's a great question. So let's assume that let's say you're my client and let's imagine that I'm with you and Robert and you're let's say you're overtaking the conversation and you're the one that's dominating, you're overpowering, you're belittling him. It doesn't matter whichever way around it is right. I'm perfectly placed to say, well, part of my process, obviously, as a duty of care, is to spend some time with you both to understand where you're both at individually and together. So part of this process is for me to have a conversation with you both, separately. And if one party kicks up, the advisor needs to push back and say, I'm sorry, but this is part of our process, right? This is our duty of care. Duty of care is a great little sentence, right? Duty of care. And you have a separate conversation with both parties. And, what you would say is, Robert, when Jackie dismisses your input in a meeting, it makes me feel really uncomfortable with that. Does that happen often? So what I've just said to him is, when I see this, it makes me feel this. Question. I've not accused you of anything. Not really. I've only said what I've seen. I've shared how I feel, and nobody can argue with how I feel because they're my feelings. And it's a question. I'm threatening. Now, clearly, my manner has to be not, well, she's out of order. What does she think she's doing? I have to be toned down. I have to be very calm. My voice has to be very mono. It has to be very sympathetic sounding. And then let's imagine I've created a calm environment to say those very few words. Before we come on to Robert's response, what if that person said, no, you've got that wrong. That's not, no. Then I would say, okay, that's okay. I'm just sharing with you, and again, hand on chest, to my heart. I'm only saying what I see, and it just made me feel a bit uncomfortable. So almost reaffirm again if they've given a defensive response. And then if you say, well, are you sure? Does that ask another question? Well, questions are amazing in financial services. We know this, right? Less talk, less answers, more questions, I think would solve a lot of problems in our sector generally. Ask the questions. Okay, well, look, if you ever do want to talk, I'm always here to listen without any judgment. And that's all you can do. All you can do. But what you would say is, and if you ever wanted to talk, I'm always here to listen without judgment, and you can contact me anytime, and everything will remain confidential between you and I. And that's all you can do. And you've just got to hope that it's planted a seed. Now, if Robert had said, actually, she has been getting a little bit neurotic recently, or, she's really controlling at the moment. I'm not really sure what's going on. I'm thinking it's the menopause, whatever. You ask more questions. Well, where else does she demonstrate that behavior? Is it in all areas of your life? Is it just when it comes to the money? Question, because you're building a picture. And financial planners have a habit of diving in with a solution, right?
Yeah.
There's no solution to be given at this very moment, because what you're then going to do, once you've explored and spotted there is a situation, or there's a situation that's now, or that there's a situation that's bubbling, you say, well, let's just keep an eye on that. Let's talk again. Maybe get them, I'd say to Robert, keep a little log up when she does that. Just maybe make a note on your phone, or, when something is said and you think it's a bit off, just make a note of it, so that, we're not trying to catch her out. Again, we're trying to sort of throw it out there. We're not trying to, get her into any trouble, but let's just build a bit of a library up of just so we can have a chat about it. Because you might forget when she says things in passing. So you're starting to build a bit of a library, and then you just monitor it. I had on one of the Facebook groups, the female Facebook groups, financial services ones, there was a lady had posted, and this is what not to do. Just I'm giving you that so it helps. And I was on this group, and it was like, speak to Michelle, Michelle Hoskin. It was basically a client has just come to me, female client has just come to me to tell me that she's being financially abused. And this woman had said, what to do. And they're like, Michelle, speak to Michelle. So she phoned me up, And we missed each other a few times. I was in the car, one thing and another, bad signal. And when I got to speak to her, I said, so what have you done so far? And she'd not done bad. She'd done okay. But she said, I went to my compliance guy and she said, he told me to phone the police. I went, please tell me you didn't phone the police. She said, I didn't. I went, thank goodness. I said, because if you'd have phoned the police based on the story you've just told me, that woman would likely be dead now, right? Not because she was in any immediate danger, because what it would have triggered in his anger would have put her in immediate danger, right? At that, after the event. She wasn't in immediate danger now, but it would have put her in immediate danger. And I said, and this is why I get out of bed every morning. I said, because that's not what you're going to do. I said, what you're going to do is you're going to call her. You're going to say, I'm here to listen without judgment. Can we get together somewhere safe? She ended up actually helping her purchase. Because again, think about it like this. So, and it was all sort of done because you care about your clients, right? But this advisor ended up buying this lady a pay-as-you-go mobile phone. She paid for it, the advisor. So because if she'd have bought it, he'd have known she'd have bought it. Right. And actually, I think to myself, it's worth 35 quid a month. I might be saving someone's life. Who's bothered? Right. And advisors have got a few quid. They can afford to do this, really. Right. Little things like this. Meetings, there was sort of a new email was set up, things like that. So there was support. She then also, the advisor ended up helping this lady and got her in touch with some of the charities. There had been debt racked up in her name that the advisor didn't know about. And the story just unfolded. But effectively, through support and a guiding hand and a supportive partner in the process of getting in contact with a number of organisations, she was able to remove herself safely and economically stable from that relationship.
Yeah.
Because she had a support. Now, this guy had isolated her from all of her friends and all of her family. And it was only because she was his financial advisor that she just happened. And, you know, if I hadn't been bouncing around talking about financial abuse, who knows what that advisor would have done? Yeah. Who knows, Becky?
Probably phone the police.
The police.
Yeah.
She may have phoned the police.
Yeah.
I mean, one very quick story, because I think it just really hits home what we're talking about. I was speaking to a lady at a women's charity, and she said to me, you know, she was in an abusive relationship, and she said, I never knew what financial advisors were. She said, now I'm a divorce coach. She said, I had no idea at the time that advisors even existed, right? She said, I thought they just lived in banks, you know, banks and building societies. And she said that she told me a story about this lady who had gone in to see her through one of the coaching sessions, counselling sessions, and she'd got boys in private school. Her husband was super wealthy, multiple businesses, huge property, posh cars, jewelry, the works, right? She didn't work, but she was a victim of economic harm. She had no access to any, not even a penny, not one penny did she have access to. Everything had to go through him. He would buy expensive items and she would be basically told what to buy, what to wear. Horrific relationship, right? She went to see a lawyer, and the lawyer basically advised her and said, we can't do anything until he sells some of his businesses, because there's no legal case for this. There's no legal support I can give you. I'm not sure what you're bringing to me, right? He missed all the signs. She didn't go to the lawyer with, I'm being economically abused. She went to the lawyer with, you know, what's my legal situation? Like, what's my position? But then she went to a financial planner. And she said to that financial planner, she explained about, access to money and, you know, not really laying it on abuse, because she probably didn't think she was being abused per se financially. It was weird, because this is how it happens. The planner, like many would and many do, said, I'll say these words and you'll know exactly what I mean and what he meant. He said, we can help you when the time is right. Meaning, we can help you when you've got some money.
Yes.
Okay, we know that that's what he meant, right? We're not stupid. And she said, the lady at the charity said, the sad thing was, 3 weeks after she went to see that financial planner, she took her own life. She left 2 boys without a mom. Now, how different that would have been if that guy would have picked up something in a Facebook group or listened to this webinar or anything. anything at all, even seeing the HSBC billboards in the streets. Imagine. But this is why it's got to become more mainstream, and that's why advisors have got a duty of care to not only know about this, but also be a beacon for people to come to them.
Do something.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you mentioned some charities there. What if you wanted to help and put these individuals in touch with some charities and be that guiding hand? There are some great charities out there. Can you just name a couple that
there are? The best one in this area is a charity called Surviving Economic Abuse, and Dr. Nicola Sharp-Jeffs, she's actually just written a book on economic abuse, and if anyone's interested, they can join in our Facebook groups or our LinkedIn groups, which is Against Financial Abuse, Confidence to Cure, and I'll post bits and pieces in there daily. And she's just written a book about it. But Surviving Economic Abuse they were instrumental in in lobbying the government and Parliament to have the Domestic Abuse Act changed so that it included economic abuse. Is now a criminal offence. So if any advisors have got any clients that are divorcing and economic abuse and financial harm or abuse is at play, it's now a criminal offence. And advisors need to know that too. And that we could do a whole podcast on that, right? And so that's obviously something they need to be aware of. Surviving Economic Abuse are the best one because they focus specifically on economic harm and economic abuse. The other charities like Refuge, Women's Aid, there's a men's charity that's called Mankind. These are all charities that are more domestic abuse focused.
Yes, to help get you out of the situation.
Yes. Yeah. Which is equally valuable, of course. But Surviving Economic Abuse, we're soon to be partnering up with them as an organisation because we're actually there's actually a new, obviously my business, Standards International, is a standards body, and there's an ISO standard now, which is ISO 22458, which is a standard in consumer vulnerability. It's a global standard, and it's absolutely amazing. So if anyone's interested on how they meet the consumer duty, just go for the standard and it will just gobble that up for breakfast and more. So Surviving Economic Abuse and Standards International are exploring partnership opportunities to work together. So Surviving Economic Abuse is by far the best one in this area specifically, and their work is incredible.
Michelle, we have sadly run out of time for today, but it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for sharing all of those stories and your journey. I think it's an amazing thing you're doing. Definitely keep it up. And I'm sure that after this podcast, you'll probably have lots of financial planners in touch with you, looking to be, getting booked onto your training courses and the support and learning more about this vital area. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Jackie.
I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. It's really interesting, isn't it, to listen to other people's points of view about different things, all relating to our wonderful financial planning profession. If you know anyone who might be interested in listening to any of these podcasts, please pass on our details to them. So that's it from me. Join me again next time when we'll be talking all things certified financial planner related and also dropping in on our new entrants to the financial planning profession. Bye for now.